Today I want to point out a pretty old-school method of web page development that has survived the ages and is still prevalent today, but that has and that will continue to have some issues as the world moves to Web 2.0 and beyond, and that's the use of nested tables. Now, a table is a web page element used to display tabular data placed in individual cells and aligned in rows and columns. Simple enough. However, somewhere along the evolution of web page development, when designers discovered that they could remove table border lines, they began using these tables and nested tables as a layout tool. Nested tables, simply put, are tables within tables. Older HTML-coded sites ended up looking plain and dull, and they had this annoying tendency to become very vertical. Nested tables provided a haven against this particular brand of dullness. Nested tables allowed web designers to control page layout by creating both larger and smaller tables with different sized cells that each displayed images and/or text. And instead of using those annoying frames, nested tables allowed columnar layouts on web pages. All was well in the world. In fact, at one point in the peak of web browsing before the introduction of Web 2.0, there was nary a website in the world that did not use nested tables as a layout function. Now, however, there is more sophisticated CSS coding that allows web designers to develop interesting layouts without complicated nested tables that also happen to be much faster loading and easier to manipulate. So when should you use or avoid tables? Well, the thing is, tables still have an important function in web page layout. Tables allow a web designer to align data in rows and columns. An easy example of this is a monthly income summary using the names of months as the column headings on the first row, and the income numbers listed directly below each month on the second row. Anyone who has used Microsoft Excel knows how tables can be a great tool to line up large amounts of data, and that layout can be duplicated using HTML on a web page. However, though tables and nested tables were once the popular way to design for web page layout, they are no longer recommended by web design gurus and SEO specialists because they can be incompatible for some browsers. Another big reason is that nested tables can be slower loading, they can be restrictive for layouts, and prevent more flexible and functional web pages. It's all about compatibility, and essentially this old-school technique, though extremely useful in its heyday, is slowly and surely becoming less so. In the world of Web 2.0, there's a strong leaning towards ensuring that web pages are compatible with many more types of web browsers than just Microsoft Internet Explorer. Now, it's Edge you've got to think about, Firefox, Chrome, Opera, and so on. Plus, web pages are accessed not only from desktop computers, but also through Wi-Fi on laptops, iPhones, Android, and other portable devices with web access. Tables just do not tend to show up well on these smaller screens in our portable world. Nor does all the table programming even translate into most smaller portable browsers. So in order to provide access to your website to more users, you need alternative layout programming. So let's talk layout and bandwidth. Besides making web pages that are easily accessible by more visitors, a web designer also wants to keep things as simple as possible on his or her end. Nested tables are an extremely labor-intensive process in maintaining consistency throughout many pages, especially if a website is large and contains hundreds of pages. In addition, a major issue with nested tables stems from potentially slower loading times from the user's perspective. Unlike CSS, which dynamically displays the content in browser windows as each element is retrieved from the server, nested tables must load all of the information and structure it before it can be displayed to the visitor. Subsequently, a visitor may see a blank site until the entire table and its contents load, which is a contrast to CSS websites which load design elements gradually. While the server retrieval may not technically be slower, from the perspective of the visitor, the site does load at a slower pace. To worsen the issue, browsers have a tendency to display nested tables quite slowly, especially in comparison to CSS design. So if your design incorporates many tables nested within each other, or a table has many rows that includes a child table, then that speed is made even more sluggish. While Firefox and others is more expeditious than Edge at rendering these nested tables, the general consensus is that nesting slows down the user's experience. And the other problem with using nested tables as a layout tool is that it requires much more bandwidth to store more coding text, as well as images, photos, and other elements inserted into each cell. This not only drains resources from a hosting perspective, but it also makes the end result slower for your visitors to navigate. So web designers need to keep in mind that visitors should be able to load and browse quickly, especially on mobile browsers that usually charge by the kilobyte. Now, CSS, also known as cascading style sheets, is a style sheet programming language that allows a web developer to create a consistent look within a website. A columnar layout that once needed nested tables can now be achieved through much easier CSS programming. More benefits of CSS include consistency. A web programmer now has the ability to create a consistent layout for many pages rather than programming each page individually. Font types, headings, columns, colors, all of this can be controlled with a single CSS page. Compatibility. CSS is read by all of the popular browsers, including Edge, Firefox, Opera, Safari, you name it. CSS coding can also be translated and read by popular mobile browsers used on Android and iPhones. Flexibility. CSS programmers can develop attractive web page layouts without the bandwidth and time drain needed of nested tables. And SEO improvement. Through the use of CSS, webmasters can improve their SEO ranking with easier coding of keywords in their header tags and by using actual text instead of GIF images for headers. CSS has become one of the best tools to create consistent web pages that are easier to find on search engines and allow visitors to navigate more simply. If you're at all unfamiliar with CSS, it is easy to learn and easy to incorporate into web designing, especially if you're already familiar with HTML. So if you're looking to improve your SEO rankings, start by incorporating CSS into your web pages. You'll also find that bots will crawl your site more quickly and have more valuable information to use in their algorithm rankings. Your users, of course, will have an easier time accessing your site through almost any browser. And most importantly, you'll be able to manage and update your entire website more easily with current content and pertinent keywords. Feel free to check out our other videos so that you can keep fine-tuning and getting the most out of your SEO. And click subscribe to stay updated with new tips and tricks to get you to the top of the search engine results pages.